About 2 years ago, I attended a Vipassana meditation course up in Massachusetts. This was a 10-day silent meditation course, which meant there was no talking, no eye contact, and no hand gestures whatsoever. That sounds intense, right? Well, that's because it was. But there's a reason why there was no talking, no eye contact, and no hand gestures. That's because they wanted you to take the focus and all this attention that we dedicate to the outside world, the external world, and turn it inward. Turn it to within ourselves, to do self-reflection, to look in and see what's going on, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, but to really take a look and see what's going on the inside. And when people ask me about my experience, I mean, unless you actually go through it, it's really hard to describe. But two words that I often use to describe my experience is a beautiful struggle. Because that's what it was. It wasn't so easy for me to make it through the 10 days. It was a struggle. On day 4 or 5, I wanted to leave, but I made it through. And then each subsequent day, I got better and I got better. And before I knew it, it was day 10 and I made it. And to me, that's beautiful because I learned so much, not just about how to handle the outside world, but how to handle me and my inside world, my internal body, not just everything on the outside, but what goes on the inside. So many things, so many amazing things. But one thing that really stood out to me, that I carry to this day, that I repeat in my head a lot of times, that helps me manage life on the outside and on the inside, is this law of impermanence. If we take a closer look at this concept of the law of impermanence, and we focus on this one word, impermanence, we should all be familiar with another word that is inside of this word impermanence, and that's permanent. And the definition of permanent is that nothing ever changes. It always stays the same, no matter what. Permanent. You can think of a permanent marker. If you draw on someone's clothes or on the wall, there's no way of washing it out. It's there forever and ever. Nothing changes. You cannot erase it. And on the other hand, you have impermanence, which is the exact opposite of permanent, which means that nothing lasts forever. Everything is going to change no matter what. Despite what we do, what we say, or how much control we think we have over a situation or a person, including ourselves. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This law of impermanence is not easily incorporated into anyone's life. And that includes my own. When I look back, before I actually was introduced to this law of impermanence, I didn't even know it existed. But what I did know was my attachments and my desires that existed, and how I tried to control these attachments while I tried to stay connected to these attachments, to a person, a thing, an object, a feeling, a piece of food, anything. I had so many of these attachments in my life, these desires that I craved. And that's the thing. We all have these cravings. I had so many more when I was younger, and especially during my active addiction. But I still get cravings today. I still crave certain things. And within that craving is an attachment. And we crave something so much that if it's not available, if it doesn't meet our expectation, then we are let down. And that's where we experience misery, sadness, grief, anger, frustration. So we need to eliminate these cravings. And at the same time, I was taught that we need to eliminate aversions, or trying to avoid things and stay away from things. Because when we allow ourselves to be consumed with these aversions, then we can also create attachments to negative things as well as the positive things. And when we don't get what we want, or when something happens that we don't want, we have an attachment to a certain feeling, to a certain person, to a certain situation, to anything. And we need to dissolve these attachments to cravings and aversions and understand that whether it's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, it's going to change. It's not going to be permanent because it doesn't last forever. It's going to be impermanent. And that's the law of impermanence. If you really think about it, I mean, truly take a step back and think about the law of impermanence, we should all be able to understand what it means. Nothing stays the same. Nothing lasts forever. Two sunsets back to back from one day to the next are not the same. So if you went to go see a beautiful sunset on one day and then you go the next day wanting that same experience, that same feeling, and if it's not the same, because it won't be, then you might feel some type of way because you were expecting, you were craving a certain sunset, but the next day you got a different one. So instead of embracing it as a new sunset, as something totally separate and singular and not in combination with the day before, then you're going to feel upset. You're going to feel angry, possibly. You're going to feel like you were let down and disappointed. And at the same time, we as people, as individuals, you, me, everybody, is always changing. We are not the same person that we were yesterday to today. A lot of us aren't the same person that we were an hour ago till right now. We're constantly changing. But it is up to us to change in the right direction so that we can grow and that we can evolve. But if we stay stuck with these attachments, then we're going to stay stuck where we are. That will disable us from actually moving forward. That will hinder our progress. That will hinder our evolution. That will hinder our growth. So truly look at this as a liberating concept, as a freeing concept. Because once we not only understand, but once we internalize and incorporate this law of impermanence in our lives, we can detach from so many things. We can detach from how we feel about something or situation or person because we know it's going to change. We know everything is going to change. It's not going to last forever. Something good that happens, not going to last forever. Something that bad happens, not going to last forever. It doesn't matter because nothing is permanent. Nothing is forever. And we know this. We just sometimes don't want to believe it. Because I can tell you this law of impermanence exists, but unless you actually and truly believe it and want to believe it, then you're not going to implement it into your life. And that's where the issues come in. That's where you create these miseries that you don't have to experience. You end up doing it to yourself. You end up harming yourself. But no one has to. You don't have to. I don't have to. And I've learned that this law of impermanence is quite liberating. Does that mean that I practice it on a daily basis all the time? No, it doesn't. I still revert and go back to old behaviors and old habits. But deep down in my brain, I know that nothing stays the same because I've been taught this. I understand it. It was broken down to me. So I know that it exists and that that is a truth. But it is up to me to actually follow through and put in the work and allow my mind to wrap itself around that truth and not try to take control and do everything on my own terms. But truly understand that this law of impermanence is everywhere. It applies to everything, especially us. This idea of control, that we can control everything, especially everything around us, allows us to feel safe. Sometimes it allows us to feel secure and comfortable, when in reality, we don't have much control over anything. Now, this doesn't mean that we should just throw our hands up and say, do what you're gonna do, universe. It's in your hands. That's not what I'm saying. Because we do have some control over our actions, over our words. But one thing that we don't have control over are our thoughts. And you might think, what do you mean? Like, I don't have control over my thoughts. If a thought's gonna pop into your head, it's gonna pop into your head, no matter what. You can't say, don't come into my head, such and such, because then you're thinking about it. And when I spoke about the law of impermanence, I also wanted to speak about the idea of thoughts. You see, those aren't permanent either. We can make them somewhat permanent if we allow them to create space to stay stuck in our minds. And that becomes an obsession that we keep going over and over and over and replaying it in our head and keep telling it to ourselves. That's an attachment. And we don't have to be attached to our thoughts. You see, for many years, I was a drug addict. Plain and simple. I was in the grips of addiction. So a lot of my thoughts during that time were about using drugs, doing drugs, and getting more drugs. So when I got clean, at least in the early stages of recovery, I would have these thoughts about using or getting drugs. And it freaked me out because I was like, I'm clean now. I'm trying to stay clean and trying to progress in my recovery. What I came to understand was that those thoughts are not a representation of myself. Those thoughts are just thoughts. Those thoughts do not represent me, the person. And I don't have to be attached to them. I don't have to allow them to become actions. Those thoughts were just thoughts. Those thoughts were not a representation of who I was as a person. They were just thoughts. They entered my mind, and that was it. It was up to me whether or not to attach to them or let them go. And I really, really learned more about this in depth when I was at this 10-day silent meditation course. Because when you are silent, when you don't talk, when you have no eye contact, when you have no hand gestures, and you're not reading any material or doing any physical activity, you're going to be one with your thoughts. And our minds are wild animals. They like to go off in any direction they feel, any direction that they want. And I really, really experienced this when I would sit for an hour-long meditation at least 3 to 4 times a day. I had some of the most outlandish thoughts, both positive and negative. I mean, things that I never thought would enter my mind, entered my mind. But when I was there and learned about this law of impermanence, I realized that I don't have to attach to these thoughts. I shouldn't attach to these thoughts, because when we do attach to these thoughts, that's when we become obsessed, and we can have an obsession and have obsessive thoughts that can take us over, that can start to run our lives because we are so focused. We have this tunnel vision. We are so narrow-sighted on this one thought. And that can be debilitating. That is not conducive for growth. We need to see the thoughts as just thoughts and not allow them to overtake our life. We need to be able to see them for what they are and then let them go. So to recap, the law of impermanence just means that nothing lasts forever. In its simplest form, everything changes no matter what. And once we really, truly recognize this concept as ultimate truth, then we can start to free ourselves from so many of these attachments, whether it's to something physical, something mental, something emotional. We'll understand that whatever we're thinking, whatever we're doing, whatever person is in our lives, whatever's going on, that it doesn't last forever. And a little secret, our lives don't last forever, if you didn't know. We have a short time on this earth in the grand scheme of things. Our lives aren't permanent. Our bodies aren't permanent. But you know what is going to last after our bodies are gone? That's our souls. And that's another aspect of this law of impermanence. What we're trying to do is free ourselves, but also free ourselves of any miseries that we cause ourselves from these attachments, whether it's a craving or an aversion. We don't want to pass on to the next life with any miseries, with any anger, with any frustration. We want our souls to be pure. We want our souls to be embodying compassion, love, and kindness in its truest form, unconditionally. Because we should all know that at some point our bodies are no more. It's our soul that goes on, that moves on. So if you believe that our souls live on after we pass away, and that they get reincarnated in some way, shape, or form into another human being, then why would you want your soul to be full of misery and anger and frustration or dark, negative energy? You'd want your soul to be pure. You'd want your soul to have this unconditional love, kindness, and compassion within it. So we have to take this law of impermanence seriously, because if we follow this law, if we incorporate it into our lives, we can stop these miseries from happening, because we will no longer be attached to anything at the end of the day. We will take it for what it is at that moment, but understand that it won't last forever. And that's where it's at right there. To truly understand, to truly internalize that nothing lasts forever. Impermanence. And when we can do that, and when we can follow this law, then we can detach from so many things that can cause us misery and leave our soul pure, leave our soul positive, filled with love, filled with kindness, filled with compassion. So when we do pass on and our souls move on to another body, they're not carrying negative stuff. They're full of all this positive love, filled with all this happiness and joy. At least that's my take on it. It might be a little bit difficult for other people to wrap their head around, but that's what I believe. I didn't always think this way, but I did always believe in reincarnation, that when we pass away, our souls live on. But when I learned about the law of impermanence, I realized that when our souls leave our body, they're in a certain condition. We don't want them to be full of misery. rather than be full of unconditional love and kindness and compassion. And one of the only ways to accomplish that is to practice the law of impermanence, to understand the law of impermanence and what it truly means. That nothing lasts forever. Nothing stays the same no matter what. And when we internalize this, we understand that we can't be attached to things. I mean, we're allowed to be, but that's where miseries come into play. When we're attached to people, when we're attached to situations, when we're attached to thoughts, that's when misery occurs, because nothing stays the same. So something that we're attached to one day is not going to be the same the next day. And that's when we get disappointed. And that's when we get upset. And that's when miseries happen. So when we understand that nothing stays the same, nothing is permanent, we can free ourselves from these attachments and truly, truly look at things in a singular sense on a day-to-day basis and appreciate them. This doesn't mean we don't appreciate the beauty of life, appreciate the beauty of another human being or of a thought or idea that we have. That's not what I'm saying. We just can't become attached to it. We can't think that it's always going to stay this way, because it's not. And once we understand this, the quicker we realize this, the easier we will be able to handle life on the outside and also on the inside. So the next time something happens in your life, whether it's with a person or a situation or a thought in your head, try not to become attached to it if that's your habit, if that's what you're used to doing. Try to look at it for what it is in that moment and then let it go. Because the attachments is where the misery happens. And if we're used to doing that and we end up feeling miserable or upset, then we want to stop that. So try to be mindful and conscious and aware when these things might come up, when we know that we become attached to anything in our lives. And look at it and ask yourself the question, why am I attached to this? Why is this so important to me? Why do I feel this way when this is in my life, when I think of this, when this person's here? Because when we understand the root, when we understand where it's all coming from, then we can start the process of change. We can start the process of growing and evolving into a better version of ourselves. Because we change too. We don't stay the same. We are impermanent. We do not stay the same. We are not permanently this person forever. It's just science, plain and simple. But honestly, be mindful. Really take a look within. Do some self-reflection and try to see where in your life you have these attachments. And if you know there's problem areas, work on them so that when the next situation happens, you can address it differently. You don't have to be so attached to that feeling, that person, that situation, that thought. It doesn't have to be a 100% success rate. We're all going to have missteps. We're all going to make mistakes. I do on a daily basis. But it's knowing, but it's being aware that you have a choice. Being conscious that you have a decision in your life now. You can either stay attached and create misery, or you can detach from these things and feel free, feel liberated, feel happier, feel joy. But it's up to you. It's up to you to put in the work, to put in the time, and to put in the effort. Because it's you that has to live your life, just like I have to live mine. And I don't want misery in my life. I don't want misery brought on by myself. Misery is going to happen. Things are going to happen that cause misery, that cause pain, suffering. But if we believe in this law of impermanence, we know that that will not be forever. And the same goes for something positive. When we feel happy about something, we have to understand that it won't last forever. Feel the feelings, enjoy the moment, but then understand that it's going to change. And once we really grasp this concept, life becomes a lot easier to handle on the outside and also within ourselves. Have an amazing day, everybody. Have a blessed day. Always be grateful. Always remember to be grateful for this moment. For this moment right now is all we truly have. So no matter if it's positive or negative, be grateful for it. And smile. Always remember to smile. I'll talk to everybody soon. Peace.